In the last episode, we saw how devastated Keanu was after his dog Daisy was kicked aggressively by the biker from Iron and Ash. In this episode, we shall see the comeback of Keanu and how he regained justice for Daisy. Kindly subscribe to the channel and like the video if you love Keanu Reeves. Thanks a lot. Now let's proceed. Keanu leaned back against the wall of the trailer, his thoughts swirling in a mix of anger and determination. The quiet hum of the film set seemed distant now, almost irrelevant in the wake of the morning's events. Daisy, still lying at his feet, let out a soft sigh. His body relaxed now, but Keanu could sense the lingering tension in the dog. He was still processing what had happened, just as Keanu was. The phone call with Hank had been a relief, but it had also set things in motion, things that couldn't be undone. The sheriff's involvement meant that this was going to escalate. But Keanu didn't care anymore. He couldn't let Iron and Ash continue their reign of terror over the neighborhood. Not when it had personally affected him, and not when it had affected Daisy. As Keanu stood, stretching his arms and walking over to the nearby set of chairs, his mind raced. He had already decided that he wasn't going to wait idly for things to unfold. He would need to prepare for the worst-case scenario, especially if it meant dealing with the bikers head-on. But even with Hank on the case, Keanu knew this wasn't going to be simple. There would be consequences, and those consequences would affect more than just him. It would affect everyone in the area. The people who lived in Brooklyn Heights, the businesses that had been harassed, and the other innocent people who had found themselves caught in the bikers' path. His phone buzzed again, breaking through his reverie. It was a text message from Hank. "Everything's set. We'll move in tomorrow. I'll keep you updated." Keanu stared at the message for a moment, his eyes hardening. Tomorrow. That was when it would happen. That was when he would see if things would finally come to a head. But he didn't want to just sit around waiting for it all to fall apart. He needed to do something today. Keanu glanced down at Daisy, whose eyes followed him as he walked back and forth. "All right, Daisy," he said, crouching to give the dog a gentle pat. "You've been through enough today. I think it's time for us to head back to the hotel for a bit. You deserve some rest." The dog wagged his tail, looking up at Keanu as if he understood. It had been a long day for both of them, but Keanu wasn't sure if he would be able to rest. Not with everything that had happened. Not with the biker gang still looming over the neighborhood, like a shadow that could descend at any moment. As Keanu made his way toward the exit of the set, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The bikers weren't just going to roll over because the sheriff was involved. They were a dangerous group, and if they were cornered, they might fight back harder. He made a mental note to check in with Hank later. The sheriff would need all the help he could get to make sure the situation didn't spiral out of control. Keanu wasn't naive. He knew there was only so much that could be done through the law, and especially when it came to dealing with criminals like the bikers. But he had to believe that this was the right course of action. Bookmark. The walk back to Keanu's hotel was quiet, the streets still hot and the sun beginning to dip lower into the sky. The noise of the city seemed to fade with each step, and the only sound that Keanu could hear was the rhythmic patter of Daisy's paws on the pavement. As they reached the hotel, Keanu let out a long sigh. It felt good to finally be away from the chaos of the film set and the confrontation. He needed time to collect himself, to think about what would happen next. He needed a moment of peace before the storm broke. Daisy walked at his side, more relaxed now, his tail swishing from side to side. Keanu couldn't help but smile, feeling a bond form between them that went beyond just their professional relationship on the film. He realized that Daisy had become more than just a co-star. The dog had become a friend, a companion he never thought he would have. Inside the hotel, Keanu let Daisy off the leash and led him toward the small sitting area near the windows. He could see the lights of the city twinkling outside, but the room itself was quiet, a refuge from the chaotic world outside. Daisy settled onto the couch, curling up with a soft sigh, and Keanu took a seat nearby, leaning back and closing his eyes for a moment. The weight of the day was pressing down on him. He had fought in countless films, faced dangers on screen that had pushed him to his limits. But none of that had prepared him for this. None of that had prepared him for standing up to a gang of bikers who weren't just part of a script, but were real threats to the people around him. Keanu let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. Funny, huh? Here I am, facing down bikers in Brooklyn Heights. I thought the toughest battles were always on set. Daisy lifted his head, looking at him curiously, as if he were listening to every word. Keanu smiled. I'll be honest, Daisy. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'll do everything I can to make sure you're safe. You're not alone in this. Daisy's eyes met his, and for a moment, Keanu swore he saw a sense of understanding there. Maybe it was just the bond they had formed over the past few days. Maybe it was the shared experience of surviving the biker gang's aggression together. Either way, Keanu didn't feel as alone in the world as he had before. Later that evening, Keanu sat at the desk in his hotel room, carefully reviewing his lines for the next day's shoot. The words on the page blurred together, his mind wandering back to the bikers. The confrontation at the cafe, the threat against Daisy. It had all happened so quickly, and it left him with a strange sense of urgency. Despite his efforts to stay focused, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't going to be as simple as he hoped. Tomorrow's operation with Hank might bring some resolution, but it could also bring more trouble. The bikers were dangerous, and Keanu knew from experience that when a group like that felt cornered, they fought back fiercely. Daisy, now resting peacefully on the couch, let out a small sigh as if he understood the weight of the moment. Keanu turned toward him, feeling a surge of affection for the dog. It was strange. He had never imagined that his role in the film would lead to something like this. Yet here he was, in the middle of a real-life battle, with his loyal dog by his side. Keanu ran a hand through his hair and sighed deeply. We'll figure this out, Daisy. We've made it this far. We can make it through anything. And as the night stretched on, with the city lights flickering outside his window, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. Bookmark everything. Keanu woke to the soft rays of the morning sun filtering through the blinds of his hotel room. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded the day before. His mind immediately jumped to the events of the previous day, the confrontation with the bikers, the threat to Daisy, and the tension that had settled over Brooklyn Heights like a storm cloud. Daisy, ever loyal, was already up, his eyes following Keanu as he moved around the room. The dog's tail wagged lazily, but there was a palpable unease in the air. Keanu had been through a lot in his career, but nothing compared to the urgency of the situation he faced now. Today was the day. Sheriff Hank Morrison had set the plan in motion, and Keanu was going to be right there with him, ready to see it through. He had made a promise to Daisy, and he wasn't about to back down now. Keanu stood, stretching as he looked at his reflection in the mirror. His expression was serious, focused. He knew what needed to be done, but he also understood the risks. The bikers weren't going to go down without a fight. Keanu's role in this was far from over, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to protect the neighborhood, Daisy, and the people who had been living in fear. As he got ready, Keanu's thoughts turned to the text Hank had sent him the night before. It had been short, but Keanu had picked up on the gravity in the sheriff's tone. Everything's set. We move in at 10 a.m. Be ready. It was 8:30 a.m. now. Keanu had a little over an hour before everything changed. There was no turning back from this. Whatever happened today would set the tone for the future of Brooklyn Heights. Daisy, as though sensing the shift, jumped to his feet and padded over to Keanu's side, offering a soft whine. The bond between them had only strengthened over the course of the last 24 hours. Keanu smiled at the dog and bent down to give him a quick scratch behind the ears. I'll be back soon, Daisy, Keanu whispered. We're gonna fix this, together. At 9:30 a.m., Keanu stood outside the hotel, looking out at the city streets. The sun was already beginning to warm the pavement, but there was a coolness in the air that hinted at the tension to come. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Hank. Keanu, Hank's voice came through, clear and direct. We're moving in. Be at Iron and Ash in 15 minutes. I need you to be there, ready to help us secure the area. Keanu's heart rate picked up at the mention of iron and ash. This was it. The bikers would have no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. "I'm on my way," Keanu replied, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline that flooded his veins. "Let's end this." Keanu hung up and looked down at Daisy, who was sitting by his side, waiting expectantly. "You ready for this, Daisy?" Keanu asked with a slight smile. Daisy wagged his tail, a signal that he was more than prepared. Keanu knew he wasn't just walking into a dangerous situation for himself. This was about something larger. The neighborhood had been under siege for too long, and now they were going to fight back. Keanu made his way to Iron and Ash with purpose, each step bringing him closer to the showdown that would either bring peace or escalate into something even more volatile. Bookmark HDL 9. The exterior of Iron and Ash was just as imposing as Keanu remembered. The weathered sign, the motorcycles parked like sentinels in front of the bar. It was the kind of place that exuded danger and lawlessness. Keanu stood across the street, watching for any signs of movement. His mind raced as he scanned the area, knowing that Hank and his team would be there soon. But as Keanu observed the bar, he could see the bikers already beginning to gather. They were getting ready, as if they knew something was coming. The air was thick with anticipation. Keanu's phone buzzed again. It was Hank. "We're in position," Hank's voice came through, low and deliberate. "Are you ready?" Keanu took a deep breath and steadied himself. "Ready. Let's do this." Keanu crossed the street, his pace slow but deliberate, his eyes never leaving the door of Iron and Ash. As he approached, he could see the biker who had kicked Daisy the day before standing outside with a group of others. The man's eyes locked onto Keanu's, his lips curling into a sneer as he recognized him. "Hey, actor boy," the biker called out, his voice filled with mockery. "Thought you'd be hiding after what happened yesterday." Keanu didn't flinch. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said quietly, his voice low but filled with a quiet rage that sent a shiver through the air. "This ends today." The biker laughed, but the sound was cut off abruptly as the first police vehicles roared into the parking lot. The sirens blared, and the officers quickly flooded the area, their movements sharp and coordinated. Keanu stood to the side, watching as the bikers were surrounded. It happened quickly, faster than he could have anticipated. Hank's team moved in with precision, securing the bar and preventing anyone from escaping. The bikers, realizing they were caught, began to resist, shouting and swearing as they tried to break free. But the law was closing in, and the weight of justice was bearing down on them. Keanu felt a sense of relief wash over him. The bikers were finally being held accountable, and the threat to the neighborhood was being neutralized. It had been a long time coming, but it was happening now. Daisy, who had been by Keanu's side the entire time, let out a low growl, his eyes focused on the scene. Keanu bent down, placing a calming hand on the dog's back. "It's over, Daisy," he said softly. "We did it." The police had successfully detained the bikers, and as Keanu watched the scene unfold, he felt a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. The bikers had resisted, but the law had prevailed. Hank's team had done their job, and the criminals were now in custody. The officers began to cuff the bikers, reading them their rights as they were escorted to waiting police cars. The entire scene felt surreal, like something out of a film. But this was real, and Keanu had been part of it. As the bikers were led away, Keanu stood in the midst of the chaos, the street buzzing with the sounds of police activity. He felt a sense of closure, but it wasn't a victory he would celebrate. It was simply the end of a dangerous chapter for the neighborhood, for Daisy, and for himself. Hank approached him, a small smile on his face. "You did good, Keanu. We got them. They won't be a problem anymore." Keanu nodded, his expression serious. "Thanks, Hank. You handled it well." "Wouldn't have been able to do it without you," Hank replied. "You were the one who gave us the push to act." Keanu looked over at Daisy, who was now sitting by his side, watching the action with quiet curiosity. It was the right thing to do. It's over now. Hank glanced at Daisy, then back at Keanu. "You and that dog seem like a good team." Keanu smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "Yeah, we are." As Keanu and Daisy walked away from the scene, the city felt different. The oppressive weight of the bikers' presence had lifted, and Brooklyn Heights seemed a little safer, a little more peaceful. The fight wasn't over yet. There would still be things to sort out, consequences to face. But for now, Keanu and Daisy could finally breathe easier. Together, they had faced the storm, and together, they had made it through. The aftermath of the operation was a mixture of quiet satisfaction and reflection. The streets of Brooklyn Heights felt different now, less tense, more alive, as though a heavy cloud had lifted. Keanu walked alongside Daisy, his companion by his side, still recovering from the stress of the last few days, but now, more than ever, an inseparable part of Keanu's life. As they made their way back through the streets, Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The bikers were in custody, their threat neutralized for good. The community was safe once again, and while there was still work to be done, the worst had passed. Daisy trotted at his side, his usual exuberant energy slowly returning as the stress of the situation began to ebb away. Keanu smiled down at the dog, appreciating the quiet bond they had formed over the past few days. What had started as a simple walk to help him prepare for his role in John Wick had turned into something far deeper, a genuine friendship. They reached the park at the heart of the neighborhood, the one that Daisy had been too nervous to enjoy the day before. Keanu paused, glancing around at the peaceful scene, a small fountain, children playing, the hum of the city in the distance. But now there was a tangible sense of calm in the air. The neighborhood had weathered a storm, but it was coming out the other side stronger. "You know, Daisy," Keanu said, glancing at the dog as he sniffed the ground, "this place is starting to feel like home again." Daisy's tail wagged lazily in response, as if in agreement. Keanu could hear the faint sound of laughter in the distance, the clink of coffee cups, the chatter of neighbors returning to their normal routines. They took a seat on a nearby bench, Keanu leaning back with a sigh of contentment. For a moment, he simply allowed himself to relax, to enjoy the quiet, knowing that the danger had passed. The streets of Brooklyn Heights had been transformed, but it wasn't just the bikers who had changed. Keanu had too. He had gone from a man trying to survive the chaos of a film set to someone who had stood up for what was right. It wasn't the kind of action he was used to, but it had felt more real than any fight scene he'd ever filmed. It was strange, Keanu thought, how life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges your way. Just when you thought you understood the world, something like this happened. A simple walk with a dog had turned into an all-out confrontation with a biker gang. But in the end, Keanu had done what needed to be done, not just for Daisy, but for the community. Keanu's phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. He reached into his pocket and pulled it out, seeing the name of the producer on the screen. "Keanu," the producer's voice came through. "I just wanted to check in and see how everything's going." Keanu smiled, his tone calm, but still tinged with the events of the last few days. "Everything's fine. We got the bikers. The neighborhood's safe now." "That's great to hear," the producer said. "But I know that things have been intense. The last few days have been rough for you, I'm sure. How are you holding up?" Keanu glanced down at Daisy, who was now resting his head on his paws, his eyes half closed in contentment. "I'm good. Just needed some time to process everything. It's been a wild ride." The producer chuckled. "I can imagine. But hey, the team's ready to get back to shooting whenever you are. No rush, though. We'll work with your schedule." Keanu took a deep breath, looking at the city around him. It was a strange feeling, knowing that after everything that had happened, life would go back to normal. Or at least, a new version of normal. There would still be work to do, more scenes to shoot, more challenges to face. But for now, Keanu was content. "I think I'm ready," Keanu said, his voice steady. "But let's take it slow. Daisy and I have earned a little time to rest." "Well, you deserve it," the producer replied. "We'll be here when you're ready." Keanu hung up the phone and stood, offering Daisy a gentle pat. "Let's head back to the set, Daisy. We've got a little work to do." Bookmark. Back on set, the crew was busy setting up for the next shot. The energy was different now. Lighter, more focused. Keanu could see the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Everyone knew what had happened, but now they were more eager than ever to dive back into work. The tension had lifted, and what had once seemed like an insurmountable obstacle now felt like a distant memory. As Keanu made his way to the set, Daisy trotting happily behind him, he could sense a change in the way the crew interacted with him. There were more smiles, more friendly nods. It was as if the shared experience of the last few days had brought them all closer together. The set had become a sanctuary once again, a place for creativity and focus, not fear. Keanu took a moment to check in with the dog handler, who was waiting near the trailers. "Daisy's doing well," Keanu said, offering the handler a smile. "He's ready for the next round." The handler grinned. "Glad to hear it. He's a great dog. You two have a special bond." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, it's funny how you can get attached to a dog so quickly. He's been more of a partner than I ever expected." Daisy sat at Keanu's feet, looking up at him with bright, trusting eyes. Keanu ruffled his fur affectionately, his thoughts still on everything that had happened. But for now, he would focus on the film. There would be time to process the rest later. As the crew gathered around for the next scene, Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had faced challenges on screen, sure, but the real challenge had been the one he faced off the screen. And now, with the neighborhood safe, Daisy by his side, and a film to finish, he felt a new sense of purpose, a sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, Keanu was at peace with his place in the world.